Welcome back, citizens, to an all-new episode of the Batcave podcast. It's your old bat chum, John S. Drew here, and we've got a new episode from the files of the Batcomputer. Calling up on the Batcomputer here, I tap some buttons, and out comes our little card here, and this time around we're going to talk about the Batmobile. I mean, we've been talking this up now for the last few weeks here, the Batmobile, because as I mentioned early on in the podcast, the Batmobile is a character in this show. And I said a few other things, and I want to get into it here in the episode, but I want to get into it with my special guest here who's going to talk about it with me from 13thdimension.com. Please welcome back to the podcast, Mr. Dan Greenfield. Hey, Dan.
Hey, John, how are you?
I'm good. I'm looking forward to this because in recent weeks, especially in getting into some of these later episodes of the second season, as we're coming to the end of the second season, I'm realizing some of the things I said about the Batmobile were not entirely accurate, and I need to amend them here. This is a perfect time to do it on this podcast. But let's get started first, just talking briefly about the history of the Batmobile itself. 1966... they need a TV show called Batman, and they need to have gadgets and devices, because if you ever read the comic book, you know Batman had his utility belt, he had batarangs, he had bat bombs, and he also had a really cool car. How did that all come about as far as realizing what a 1966 Batman television series Batmobile would be all about?
I confess that I'm not an expert on all the ins and outs of it, but the basic story goes that they went to George Barris in his garage, in his custom car garage, and he took a 1955 concept car, a Ford Futura, and you can look it up online. You can actually see it. I think they only made the one or two or whatever it was. It was a very futuristic looking car with a bubble top, and it's very sleek, very typical mid-50s, mid-century kind of look. And he basically built it from there, or they built it from there, adding the bat wings and giving it a front that looked like a bat, kind of a bat head, and tricked it out with all of the different things that you would expect the Batmobile to have. The Batmobile, of course, in the comics was a mainstay in Batman comics. Early on, he just simply had a car, but it wasn't too long that he had a special Batmobile that had all these extra devices, and it was as much a part of Batman as the Batcave or, like you say, the Batarangs or any of the other devices. The Batmobile was very, very important. Of course, the irony being that he goes to work in a city which having a Batmobile of any kind is probably the least effective way to get around. You probably should have had the Bat Subway or the Bat Hovercraft to get through the traffic. Nevertheless, when you suspend your disbelief, the Batmobile is the way to go.
Yeah, they never seem to really address the fact that there's like a lot of traffic in Gotham City. And forget about even just Batman 66, just in the comic books in general.
There are an occasion references to it, but yeah, the Batmobile always seems to be able to get where it needs to go in very quick fashion. At least in the movies, they kind of addressed it a little bit by making it this tank that could move and go over things and go on rooftops if it had to. That's why I liked it. Fairly recently there was in the comics there was a flying Batmobile, which actually made a lot of sense. That you could if they encountered any obstacles, it could fly over it, which I always thought was actually kind of a cool idea. And I was surprised that it took them that long to do that on a regular basis. I mean, they would have things like the flying Batcave, and of course we've had the Batcopter and other vehicles. But the Batmobile itself, going back to the show, the Batmobile is part and parcel of the show. I mean, people remember a lot of elements of it, but the Batmobile, for a lot of people, that's their favorite part.
Now, I seem to recall, because I see this on Facebook from time to time in the various Batman groups, and again, I am no expert in the Batmobile lore for that matter, and I've never claimed to be really even an expert in Batman lore, the 66 series. I'm learning as I go along and do this podcast, but there were, as there are with other television series, the Knight Rider had it and Dukes of Hazzard had it, that there were certain cars that were for the show, for the actual scenes of just moving through the streets, and then there were the stunt cars as well. And based on what I'm reading from different people, and this always seems to bring a certain level of argument over which car was which, but there were a total of 5 cars that were used for various aspects of production or promotion.
I'm no expert on any of that. I mean, people who are really, really into that, they argue the merits and they study pictures and what have you. To me, it's all the same. It's a Batmobile. In fact, I remember as a kid, I went to a car show in New York City, and they had the Batmobile there, and it had the felt flocking. There was because apparently in the early 70s or late 60s, that was a thing, to have a car that wasn't, it didn't have the metallic sheen. It was actually covered in like a felt, which I think I still don't really understand because I'm not a car guy. I don't really understand the appeal of that, but I remember seeing that and I'm like, why is the Batmobile covered in felt? Why is it fuzzy? But apparently that was a thing. Now, I don't think they ever used it for the show, not that I recall anyway, certainly. But some of the ones that went on tour had that flocking on it. I think people call it like bat felt or bat flocking. Yeah, I've seen references to that. But to me, the Batmobile is the Batmobile. I guess I'll leave it to better minds to argue the differences, the subtle differences between each, because certainly to this bat layman's eyes, I can't tell the difference.
I often wonder, had the show moved on into the 70s and such, because, as with the comic books, we always get the Batmobile that sort of reflects the cars of the time. Yes. Would there have been, if not alterations, then just flat out, 1970, the new Batmobile rolls out and it's a different car altogether?
Oh, I could certainly see that. It could have been something a little bit maybe more a bat gremlin, so a pacer. Yeah, sure. I'm sure that we might have seen something like a Bat Nova. Yeah, because like you say in the comics, I mean, he's had hundreds. I mean, there's a company out of Britain called Eagle Moss, and every 2 weeks, which is crazy, every 2 weeks they come out with another with a magazine and with a small diorama of different Bat vehicles, and it covers everything. In fact, I've got the Batmobile, the Batcopter, Batboat, the Batcycle, and the Batgirl cycle. But they've got comic book versions, and they've got villain vehicles, and they've got comic book vehicles. And it's true, Batman has had so many different versions, and I got to figure that at some point, if the show had lasted, that maybe he would have ended up with a Bat Corvette or something like that.
Part of the reason we're talking about the Batmobile here is that the Batcave podcast, along with 13thdimension.com and East Coast Comic Con, we were running a contest for the last 2 weeks. And Dan, we've got the winners for those contests. And what we're going to do is throughout this special episode on the Batmobile, we're going to be announcing the winners. So I think it's about time we take a look at the first winner here. Dan, what is the prize package this time around?
Okay, well, I'll take it from the top. The East Coast Comic Con is April 11th and 12th at the Meadowlands Exposition Center in New Jersey, just across from the city. So I want to stress this for people who are listening, waiting to hear if they are a winner. If you're not a winner, tickets are cheap, and better to get them in advance because they go up on day of the day of the show itself. That they go up by $10. But it's going to be a nice 2-day show. We've got some great comic book guests. As well, like Neil Adams, of course, one of the great for me, the greatest Batman artist ever, but also Jim Steranko, Herb Trimp, the co-creator of Wolverine and also an Incredible Hulk artist. Larry Hama is going to be there. Will C. Portacio is going to be there. I mean, just a long list of Arthur Adams. So, even if you're a Marvel guy, a lot of different artists and writers are going to be there. Check it out at eastcoastcomiccon.com. That's just like it sounds, East Coast Comic Con, all one word, .com. You'll get right to our page and you can check out the tickets. Now, that pitch over, yes, we were running a 2-week contest with 6 different prize packs. And the winner, I'll just go, what all of the winners of the contest get are 2 tickets to the show. They also get a Batmobile t-shirt. They also get a caricature of themselves in the Batmobile by artist Howard Bender. And if you want to take, anybody who entered has seen this, but just in case you haven't, you're listening because you want to know more about the Batmobile, go to the website and you can, 13thdimension.com, and go under the contests button and you'll find our Batmobile contest. But Howard is going to be doing caricatures of the winners sitting in the Batmobile. And you also, as I just said, you get to sit in the Batmobile. This is the Batmobile that's owned by Jeff Breeden. Not one of the original Barris cars, but I've actually been in it. I've ridden in it. You wouldn't know the difference. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous vehicle. And it's got a little bit of its own pedigree. It was recently on Comic Book Men with Adam West. Adam West, Burt Ward have all sat in it. Norman Reedus from The Walking Dead. So Daryl Dixon has been in this Batmobile, as well as other stars. Marky Ramone. So if you're a big punk fan, he's been in this car also. We have 6 prize packages, and we'll mention them as we go. But the first prize package is the one called the To the Batmobile package. Fitting. The winner of this package gets a Mattel Batmobile. This is the one that's about a 1.5 feet, 2 feet long. It's scaled for the 6-inch Mattel Batman figures. And you get a Batman figure to go with it. So you get basically your starter set. You get your Batmobile and you got your Batman. And the winner of this one is John O'Hare of Middle Village, Queens. And we have 5 more to come after this.
Well, congratulations, John O'Hare. Nice going. Let's get back into this talk here on the Batmobile itself. And I mentioned at the top of the podcast how I said early on when I started this show that the Batmobile was a character, but one thing I also said was that as the show went on, it became more of a device and lost that distinctiveness. It was just as much of a tool rather than an actual entity, like a Batarang or something. And I was wrong, because in recent weeks in watching episodes, as we're moving towards the end of the second season, I find I'm really wrong in that assessment. I don't know if it's just my memories or what, but the Batmobile clearly is a character. And there's one scene in particular that really struck me, and that's what solidified it. I just recently recorded the review for the 3-part Penguin Marcia episode, and the Batmobile is necessary to catch Batman and Robin as they're hurling across Gotham City, having been shot across by a catapult, and Batman's using the remote control to guide the Batmobile to the place he's calculated is the landing point. But at one point, there's a group of kids crossing the street. The Batmobile stops in its tracks, and it could have just simply stopped and just picked up. But instead, it sits there and it revs and it sort of like is anxious. It's because it's got to go and catch its master. And I thought that was just brilliantly done in what, as we've discussed, was a somewhat disappointing episode, but also, as you'll see when we get to it in a few weeks' time, doesn't deserve all the criticism it gets. It actually has some fun points to it. But yeah, definitely the Batmobile continues to maintain that identity as another character, along with, all the other characters we have in the show of Gordon and Alfred and Aunt Harriet and all.
The thing is, some of my favorite parts of the Batmobile is when they really focused on in and of itself. I mean, you had in the very first episode, I think even the Riddler says when he's trying to blow up the Batmobile, and the Batmobile itself keeps saving itself. But also the episode with the Penguin, where the Penguin is, he tricks it out as the Penguin-mobile, which just seems so wrong. He installs the umbrella over it, and he puts the penguins on the side. But from a distance, Batman and Robin are able to control it and drive them crazy, and that's a lot of fun. And then they talk about having to fumigate the Batmobile. A lot of great scenes specifically with the Batmobile where they really focus on how special it is as opposed to just any other car. As far as it being a character, yeah, like you say, I mean, it really depends on the episode that they use it. And yeah, sure, it was a device, but I mean, it is still a car.
It is still a car, but there is just something about it. I know that, if you ask most men our age, if you had your choice of a car from, television and movies, most of them to this day will still point out they'd prefer the 66 Batmobile over KITT.
Oh yeah. I mean, because KITT was a really cool looking car, but it didn't have the flair of the Batmobile. I mean, what's great about the Batmobile is that it's the Batmobile. I mean, it looks great. It's a great looking vehicle, and it's a style that endures. I mean, it's the first time I actually got to sit in a Batmobile. Long story short, I was in New York City and I got to sit in it and someone took a picture, and it remains my Facebook avatar and I haven't changed it except for a couple of quick moments. In fact, I've got a lot of emails and references to that picture of me sitting in the Batmobile, because why would I want to sit in any other car?
Right. Well, it's funny too, because in a recent episode, Jim Beard from Gotham City 14 Miles, he made this really good point. He said that, there is no such thing as a bad picture of the Batmobile, because the way it was designed, no matter where you shoot it from, it looks so incredible.
Yeah, they took great care, because even from behind, it looks really cool. I mean, the whole rear of the vehicle looks great. And they show it whenever it goes out of the Batcave, and you see the back, and you see the flame coming out. And that's one of the coolest things about seeing it. The Batmobile that's going to be at East Coast Comic-Con, Jeff Breeden's Batmobile, is tricked out to shoot flame. I mean, it's going to be an indoor show, so you won't get to see it, I'm sure. But when you see it up close, it's amazing. Of course, I was always surprised that it didn't blow up the car. But yeah, it is really cool. And from the front, and you have the bat beams and that little thing that little X thing that's right on the hood that is used, I guess, also as a bat beam. I think it kind of changed a couple of times depending on the episode.
Right.
And then, of course, you open up the trunk and there's the mobile Batcomputer, which I remember there's an episode where Chief O'Hara is like surprised that Batman's got a computer in his car. And of course, at the time, that was all campy and strange. And yet now that's quaint by comparison because now people, of course, have computers in their pockets.
Yeah. So he really went all out. I mean, including like details right down to, because nobody really thinks of let's look in the trunk.
Right. And of course, the atomic pile in the Batcave powers the Batmobile. It's actually an atomic powered car.
Right.
It doesn't run on gas, it runs on atomic power.
What do you say we tell our listeners about the second winner in this contest?
Sure. This is a special package. This is the Let's Roll package. This is the other side. This is the Green Hornet part of our package. The winner of this package gets a hardcover copy of Batman 66 Meets the Green Hornet. This is the book written by Kevin Smith and Ralph Garman with art by Ty Templeton that DC Comics and Dynamite put out. The Batman 66 comic has been terrific since they put it out. It started a couple of years ago. It runs digitally first, and then they put it out usually about a month or so later in print. And they did it with the Green Hornet. Dynamite has the Green Hornet license, and DC's got Batman. So they did a crossover, a 6-issue series that basically is a sequel to the 2-parter from the Batman show. And it is really great. It's the voices are just right. The art is terrific. You get a lot of good Green Hornet and Batman moments, and you get a really good fight scene between Robin and Kato. So this book collects the whole story, all 6 issues in hardcover. And as a bonus, you get a box set of Factory Entertainment's Green Hornet and Kato action figures as they're shown on the show. And they're more or less in scale with the Mattel Batman action figures. So if you have those, these are slightly larger, but you can, you can still use them together so you can have your own crossover. So this is basically our Let's Roll package. And the winner of that is Michael King of Fair Lawn, New Jersey. So congratulations, Michael. Enjoy it. It's certainly good reading, and you get those action figures besides.
Yes, congratulations, Michael. Enjoy, and make sure that when you guys come to the show, you come see me and Dan. We're going to be there doing some podcasting and such, and of course, Dan's running the show, so...
Well, I mean, my partner Cliff Galbraith is running the show, but it's the sister operation to 13th Dimension. And yeah, we're going to be there. We're going to be podcasting, and we're going to be doing all sorts of stuff. We're going to be doing panels also. And if by the way, any of you Batman fans are Planet of the Apes fans, and judging by the people who entered the contest, there certainly were, because we were running a concurrent Planet of the Apes contest, and I saw a lot of the same names entering both contests. We're going to be doing a Planet of the Apes panel, and the Planet of the Apes panel, in fact, is going to feature you, John, as well as Scott Beatty, who is a comic book writer and also an action figure expert, and the chief designer for NECA that makes all the Planet of the Apes action figures. Randy Falk is going to be on that panel as well. So we're going to be talking about Planet of the Apes memorabilia, our favorite movie moments, and really celebrating the fact that we're going to be sitting in the Forbidden Zone and podcasting from the heart of, I shouldn't say the heart of Ape City, the outskirts of Ape City.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. I once had an opportunity to sit in on a Planet of the Apes panel, and they scheduled it the same time I was taking some photos with some guests of the con, and I couldn't make it. So I really regretted that, because I happen to love the Planet of the Apes. I love the original 5 movies. I really like what they're doing with the reboot.
Yeah, I like the first reboot movie more than the second one. Look, as much as I love Batman, and of course Batman is first and foremost, first in my heart, I love the Planet of the Apes. Absolutely love it. So I can't wait to just, discuss that. Plus, we'll also be giving stuff out. Boom Studios is providing some of the paperbacks of really great Apes comics that they've done over the last couple of years. And we might have some other surprises in store as well. We're going to. I personally am going to be doing a panel with Neil Adams, and we're going to be doing some other things as well. And also at the end of the show, we will tell you how you can collect your prize and how you're going to get more information so that you know how this will work. Because as I mentioned, you do have to come to the show to pick them up.
Yes, you do. All right, let's move on to the next topic we're going to be talking about here, memorable moments. Now, I know we mentioned a couple here so far, but Dan, for you, what stands out as quintessential, this is what the Batmobile's all about?
I'm going to go very, very simplistic. It was always exciting to see it coming out of the Batcave. And in a way, one of my favorite moments in watching the show is the point of view shot that you would get to see as if you're sitting in the Batmobile and you see the rock wall open before you. You know, they didn't do it a lot.
No.
There was a point of view shot sometimes that they would show you coming out of the Batcave. I love that shot. It really puts you, pardon the phrase, in the driver's seat. And it's just a great bit. But just seeing it come roaring out. But there were a couple of images, like at the beginning of the Batman movie, with the music that goes over it. You see them driving down the highway. Also a big fan of the premiere, where you've got that one scene that I referenced earlier, where the Riddler is trying to destroy the Batmobile. And that's really where we get a really good taste. They really kind of tell us what the Batmobile is, and that it's more than just simply a vehicle, that it's got the fire extinguisher, it's got those rockets, it's got all sorts of different devices that they're able to use, and that this is not just a car, that this is a weapon in the war against crime. I'm trying to think of what else specifically. I don't know. Those are the ones that immediately come to mind.
For me, it's funny because I've been told, I don't know how true this is, maybe you can confirm it for me, that the Batmobile itself wasn't really a very fast car, that what we saw was just sped up film a lot of times.
Yep.
For sped up film, it still looked pretty good. I mean, with there's a few times where you realize it's sped up film. That I seem to recall, in fact, actually the Penguin episode we were talking about, the Penguin goes straight, when the Batmobile screams up to the Penguin Protection Agency and Batman and Robin get out of the car, they still keep the film sped up, so Robin and Batman look like Keystone Cops the way they're running into Penguin's place. But the car itself, as it moved, it seemed flawless to me. Like, it really did look like it was tearing through the roads. It didn't look like it was just sped up film. And I really appreciated that. So that as a result, anytime you had Batmobile chases, whether it was just like I mentioned, the recent Marcia Queen of Diamonds Penguin team up where they're chasing after it in they're chasing after the gold tank. I liked that. Or one of my all-time favorites is the Two-Face episode where they're going through the old Western town.
Oh, False Face episode.
False Face. I said Two-Face.
Yeah.
False Face, yes.
Yeah, and then they pretend to blow it up, and you see just the skeleton of the Batmobile.
Yes.
I always loved that. I think that's really cool. I was like, wow, that's really neat. And the fact that they actually went to the trouble of actually building that. You mentioned this, first to go back, you mentioned this the sped up film. When they come out of the Batcave, of course, that's sped up. But a lot of the highway stuff that you see is at its full speed. But apparently it could only go about 35 miles per hour. But 35 miles per hour is still fast when you're filming it from a distance. It certainly looks like it's going fast or that it's roaring down the road. But that's my understanding, is that it only had like a top speed of about 35 miles per hour. And apparently the brakes weren't great either. And you can sometimes see that. They would come driving into the Batcave. And I was like wondering, and it kind of had to screech to a halt, not just for the effect, but it's also as if they were afraid that it was going to go plowing into the wall at the other end of the Batcave.
Right.
You could also see whenever they would, come to a stop like that, you could really see the shock absorbers and the way it would bounce. And they definitely, you could definitely see the seams if you look closely enough. But I always like as far as other parts that I like about the Batmobile, I always like the scenes where they're just driving and talking and you see the stock footage in the background, because they're almost always going down Broadway or somewhere where you can see like, Times Square behind them, and you get to see some of the footage, the stock footage of 1960s New York, or maybe by that time it was 10-year-old footage. It might have been 1950s New York.
Yeah, you mentioned that on a previous podcast too, how you'd like to see what the marquees were showing and such.
Yeah.
It's
just as a little bit of a mid-century buff as far as pop culture goes. That always interests me.
I also, again, another aspect of the Batmobile itself was just the bat turn.
Yes, Commissioner? A patrolman has just called in. There's another man giving away free umbrellas, boy wonder. Outside the bank at Jefferson and 12th.
Roger. Bank, Jefferson and 12th.
Hold tight. Bat turn.
That always excited me.
Yeah, me too, especially because you got to see those the parachutes with the Bat logos on them. And I never even noticed until later that you see them packed on the back of the Batmobile, that from behind you actually see there's like twin like canvas packs that are attached to the back of the Batmobile, and those are the Bat turn parachutes.
Right. It's funny because we were mentioning before about the different versions of the Batmobile and all that, and the fans and the experts, and I'm sure maybe someone could tell us. I always thought that was one thing that like really saddened me was when they did that hero roast, the superhero spoof thing in the 70s.
yeah.
Those two, that Batmobile was just awful.
I don't even remember it. I haven't seen that show in forever. It's too painful to watch.
It is.
It's really brutal. Yeah.
Yeah. So why don't we get into our third winner here of the contest? Dan,
Sure.
What's the prize package?
Well, this is the Vile Villainy package. These are two Figures Toy Company 8-inch. These are the Migos-style action figures. It's Pagliacci variant Joker. This is from the Joker's Utility Belt episode, or where at the end of the episode, the Joker's dressed up like Pagliacci from the opera. And then also Shane is the one that comes with it. These are actually versions of that were sent directly to us at 13th Dimension for review. So they are in perfect condition. They're gorgeous. They've been featured on the website. And you get both of them. And it also reminds me of the occasional time when Batman, when the Joker actually would have his own, the Joker-mobile that you would see in the surfing episode and other ones. And also the one vehicle that the villains had that I think we only saw the one time was that when Catwoman, Eartha Kitt Catwoman, had her own Catmobile, which I thought was pretty awesome. Okay, well, the winner of these two awesome action figures is Gary Moyer of Maywood, New Jersey. So, Gary, enjoy them. It's the Vile Villainy pack, the Joker in Shame.
Yes, and definitely enjoy. Speaking of all these items we've been talking about here, all these different forms of Batman merchandising and such, the 60s Batmobile had its share of merchandising as well. Not just in the 1960s, but now the renaissance of all the merchandising. We're seeing our fair share of Batmobiles. In fact, I'm looking at, I forget the brand. I want to say Popco, but I think I'm wrong. That's not the name of it.
Funko.
Is it Funko? They've got
Funko.
It's not a bobblehead so much, but it's just a little Batman with a giant head, and you can put him in the Batmobile.
Yep, the Pop Vinyl.
Pop Vinyl, that's it.
Funko's Pop Vinyl, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the Batmobile, it's an interesting thing because it's one of the few things that you throughout the I should say the post history of the show. After the show went away, as it's been remarked upon many times, when the show kind of went into that limbo of not being able to be released on video. There were no likeness agreements so that you couldn't get an Adam West action figure. All that stuff came together in the last couple of years. But the one thing that was always a constant was the Batmobile. It was a different kind of licensing, so you could get, Hot Wheels would come out with the Batmobile. Of course, actually, I think my very first Batman toy probably was the Corgi Batmobile and Batboat set, which was the Batmobile was a die-cast Batmobile, and it had a removable Batman and Robin, and it in and of itself was tricked out. It had like a chainsaw cutter in the front. It had rockets. When you rolled it, it actually had little plastic flames that would shoot out the back. It was great. And I have my original is long gone, but I do have one now, and it had a trailer on the back with the Batboat on it as well. And I used to remember bringing the Batboat in the bathtub with me. I mean, that's how young I was. I couldn't have been more than 4 or 5 years old. But that was even before Migos. That's what I had. But all through the years, there have been various versions of Batmobile. In Japan, it was. I mean, if you go online and you look up Japanese Batmobile, there are all sorts of Batmobiles that they had that were basically these tin vehicles, and I actually had one. Well, I don't even know how I got it, but it was battery powered, and you flip the switch, and it would ride along on the floor on its own. And they had different colors. They had like a bright blue one. They had a red one. I think there was like a gold one. And then you also see other ones that are out there that just in and of themselves look really great. They say Batmobile on them, and they've got like pictures of Batman and Robin on them, but they're shaped like the original Batmobile or the 66 Batmobile. But for years, you've been able to get them. There have been model kits. But now what's great because of the resurgence is that there's a lot of different versions that you can get that are scaled differently. The Mattel one that I mentioned earlier, it looks really terrific, and you can put your 6-inch action figures in there. NJ Croce, the company that makes Gumby, and they do all these bendable figures, they've got one that's coming out soon. We just reviewed it at the website. where you can remove Batman and Robin from it, and it's kind of scaled down. It's about 10 inches long. Eagle Moss, as I mentioned, has them. There's Hot Wheels versions. There's so much of it out there. In fact, in the next gift pack that we're going to give away, there is a Batmobile bottle opener, magnetic bottle opener, and it looks like an old Corgi Batmobile, but it actually, you can open your favorite Bat beverage with it as well. So yeah, there have been a ton of them. Did you ever have any of them when you were a kid?
I didn't. Not as a kid, no. It's funny because a lot of the things that I was a fan of, Batman, $6 Million Man, I had very few of the toys. I think I had a $6 Million Man game. I had a Batman game, but I wanted them. I think what it really was just, they were the hot toys of the time, and my mom was not one to, brave the storefronts to get in there and get some of these things. I mean, I didn't get my first $6 Million Man figure until I was 30.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I had the Migos. And what's interesting there, of course, is that the Migos were based on kind of a hybrid based on the comic book and based on the show at the same time. I mean, they couldn't use the likenesses, but the choice of villains, the choice of characters, the look of the Batcave toy set borrowed a lot from the show. And of course, most, significantly, the Batmobile, the Mego Batmobile was basically a Batman 66 Batmobile. It had the three pipes in the back. It had the stickers on the side of the Bat logo. It wasn't the same sticker. And the front, of course, looked very much like the Batmobile. And it never said anything about the show, but it was basically the same design. And that, of course, was my all-time favorite one because that was my Mego Batmobile, and that's where I played with that like crazy.
I would imagine that part of that, too, though, was just the 60s TV series was, now available in syndication in the 70s, and it was very popular. I mean, even though I've said it before, I'm a first generation syndication baby when it comes to Batman. I never watched the show originally, but we talked about Batman as much in the playground, as much as we would talk about Buck Rogers or $6 Million Man or Battlestar Galactica, all those first run news shows that were running in primetime. We all talked about Batman, and we would, it was just as alive for us and just as much, new and fresh to us. So I would imagine that was all, very smart on Migo's part to do all that merchandising in that vein. And yet at the same time, nowhere do you see, from the TV show.
Oh yeah, I mean it made sense. I mean that's how most people knew Batman and Robin. I mean, and you're right, it was for the kids. That was like other than comic books, that was the way you got your Batman and Robin. There was no, you didn't have what it was today. You didn't have the movies and the video games and all of that. It was the TV show and the Filmation cartoons, and that's how you got your Batman if you weren't reading the comics. Of course, I was reading the comics also. But, from the earliest days, I mean, that's how I got into Batman to begin with, was through the show. And it was on Channel 11 in New York.
Right.
And it was on every day after school.
There's only one person who can help us. Batman.
Our task is to fight crime.
Only TV's original Batman has Bat Villains, Bat Peril, Bat Bombs,
Holy detonation.
Bat Gadgets,
Pow.
Bat Bits, and the Bat Tusi.
It's Batman.
Bats. I'm surrounded by bats.
The Batman Hour, starting Monday at 5 on Channel 11.
And the biggest problem you ever had was trying to figure out that on Channel 7 on the 4:30 movie, if they were running the movie at the same time they were running the show on Channel 11, what were you going to watch? And you'd find yourself switching back and forth during commercials. And I remember all of that stuff. And of course, that was Batman for a very long time. And for us, we didn't know the difference between syndication. We just knew daytime TV versus nighttime TV.
Right. Exactly. Why don't we talk about the fourth winner for this contest here, especially since you were mentioning, the Batmobile and such like that.
Yeah, this is the Riddle Me This package. Both of these items are from Diamond Select, and it's a Frank Gorshin Riddler bust of him looking venal and vile. And it comes with, also from Diamond Select, the Batmobile bottle opener. It basically is about the same size as the Corgi Batmobile, as I mentioned. On the undercarriage, there's a bottle opener, so you can use it to open your favorite Bat libation. And the winner of this package, along with all the other things that you win with the prize pack, is Raph Branca. I keep wanting to say Ralph Branca, the old baseball player, but Ralph Branca from Middlesex, New Jersey, gets the Riddle Me This package, again, provided by Diamond Select. So thank you, Diamond Select.
Congratulations, Raph. Very cool. Very cool. That's one thing I actually wouldn't mind getting my hands on is a bottle opener myself, because I have a little bit of a wet bar in my basement. So it would
really?
be, so it would be a really cool little thing to go along with. Because I do, like, if I can find any of those types of things, I have my $6 Million Man coasters that I put out.
Oh, that's great.
When I serve drinks and stuff. I briefly want to talk about this because I'm way behind, but I'm fascinated by it. The Batman 66 comic, in particular the Batmobile and how it's portrayed there, because, as I say, I'm behind, but I see these images that people post on Facebook, and I'm really curious to know, like, what the deal is, or some of them make sense. Like, I know there's a Londinium episode. They go back to Londinium. I don't know if they actually call it that. And this time they introduce Batman to, Alfred does it, actually. He comes up with the British Batmobile so that the wheel is on the correct side and everything.
Yeah. The most recent, well, no, not the most recent, the one that came out last month, the print episode, the Joker Man episode. See, I always call them episodes. I never call them issues. It's funny. The Joker Man issue, now again, with Batman 66, you can get these digitally, but then they also come out in print. I read them in print because I'm old school like that. The Joker Man issue has the Batmobile. The Joker's got his own version of the Batmobile, and it basically looks just like the Batmobile, only it's different colors and with a different logo. And it's purple with like green accents. And yeah, I mean, that's the wonderful part about that comic, is that the writers and the artists who do it, and primarily it's Jeff Parker, but also they have people like Tom Pyre step in, and some other writers also step in. And for the most part, Jonathan Case is the artist on it, but they also have a lot of guest artists as well. Ruben Procopio and Dave Bullock has done stuff. And as I mentioned, Ty Templeton did the Batman Green Hornet story. But yeah, the Batmobile is, all the Bat vehicles. And of course, the great thing about that comic is that they can do things there that they couldn't do on the show. They have unlimited budget, as it were, for special effects. So they do add various elements that fit the show's ideals and concepts, but they can stretch themselves a little bit. In the very first issue, for example, there's a sky battle between Batman and the Riddler that you could never have done well on the TV show because of the budget. But I'm getting off point. Yeah, the Batmobile, of course, is very much part and parcel of it, and they go out of the way. Mike Allred does all of the covers, and you see it quite a bit, used as imagery on the cover as well. Because for a lot of people, the Batmobile is as special as anything else where the show goes.
Now, there was a cover, though. I don't know if it was Michael Allred's, but there was a cover that I remember some people complaining about where the Batmobile actually had two exhausts. Am I misremembering?
I don't know. I don't know. Well, if it did, I didn't notice it. I mean, there have been, I don't know. I know Mike. He loves Batman 66 as much as anybody else. I would have a hard time believing that he would make that kind of mistake. But I don't know. It might have also been, maybe it was a variant cover, or maybe It was just the image had been altered or somehow. I don't know. Couldn't tell you. Sorry, I can't. It's that one escaped me.
Right. And I just saw on Facebook actually this morning before we recorded this, I'm assuming this is from the most recent issue, Batman and Batgirl's in the panel too. It's just one panel as they're introducing a yellow Bat car.
I haven't read the new issue. This is the one. I've actually been waiting for this one for some time. I did a whole special story at 13th Dimension on it. This is where Batman goes to Japan. And he goes to Japan to battle Lord Deathman, who was, of course, Deathman in the comics at the time, and as a character who kind of has his own interesting history. So if you want to know more about it, go to 13thdimension.com, and in the search window, put in Lord Deathman. But if it's Batman and Batgirl and a gold Batmobile, that probably is a nod to the Japanese tin vehicles that were different color Batmobiles. I can't speak to it because I haven't read it yet.
Right.
But if that image popped up, that's probably from that story.
Am I also correct, or am I mistaken? The original Batmobile, I mean, way back, it was red, wasn't it?
Detective 27. Which came out in 1939. My recollection is that in that story, he didn't have a car at all. Originally, he just had a car, and it was red.
Okay.
I mean, they didn't even call it the Batmobile as far as I can remember. And then it became a darker car, and then eventually they actually, they were making it up as they went along. they came up with the idea, and I think it was Bill Finger, a Batmobile that had a big bat head on it. A big, enormous bat head on the front. And basically that version with some variation went from like the early 40s all the way into the early 60s. I mean, basically for 20 years, they had essentially what was the same concept. It was a big roadster, almost like a DeSoto, that had, and they would change various elements. Sometimes it had a bubble roof, sometimes it had a regular roof, but basically it was a big car with a bat head on it. And then it wasn't until the 60s that they really started to change it, and it became in 1964 when they reintroduced where they did the new look Batman, where they put the yellow around the bat on his chest. Mm-hmm. And they started, with a different art style. They had a bat. That's kind of where you see a lot of the Batman 66 vehicles start to come into play. This was an open air car. It was a convertible. I think it was based on a Corvette at the time, really sleek looking. And then when the show came around, which was basically a combination of that look and the older, more hulking look, plus with the bubble top and all of that, the Batmobile itself started to pop up in the comic. And it wasn't necessarily note for note. They would they would draw a bat head on the hood, or they would make it kind of look like the Batmobile, but maybe they would change or alter something. I assume that that's because they wanted to have the look, but they didn't want to do it exactly, whether it was for rights or whether it was they wanted to be distinct. I don't really know. But it was very, very typical. And then in the 70s, it changed again, and it went back actually more like the original. It wasn't a red car, but it was basically just a dark blue car that had kind of a bat head on the hood, but it basically just looked like a more modern Corvette. And then through the 70s, when Super Friends came about, which their vehicle, of course, the Super Friends Batmobile was based more like on the look of the 66 Batmobile. Right. Then that look kind of returned to the comic books, and it's gone up and down, over the years. Like, for example, so many people now are familiar with the Tumbler from the Batman, the Dark Knight movies. The beginnings of that were really in Dark Knight Returns, the 1980s Frank Miller story, where the Batmobile was basically a tank. So you've seen it. The Batmobile from the show has definitely influenced the look on the comic, and vice versa. As you mentioned earlier, it's always reflective of the Batmobile in the comics has always been reflective of the time.
What do you think of? I mean, I'll be honest with you. When I saw that Tumbler the first time, I didn't care for it at all. I mean, to me, it just was brute force. It wasn't anything stylish.
Oh, I prefer the more stylish version. I remember when I saw the Batman 89 for the first time, I was able to get to a special screening before it had actually come out publicly in 1989. I was living in Boston at the time, and the crowd was so into it in the best possible way that when the Batmobile came on screen for the first time, the theater actually erupted in cheers and screams, and people were clapping. And of course, that version of the Batmobile, while modern and more goth and more Tim Burton-y, it also, definitely shared some of the DNA from the 66 Batmobile, because at the time, the Batmobile had to have those bat wings. It had it definitely looked like a much larger, darker version of the 66 Batmobile. There's definitely in my mind anyway, there's a connection there. Now, of course, they feel like they can go in a completely different direction. But I prefer the sleek Batmobile. I prefer the more stylish Batmobile than to the Tumbler. I've never been a big fan of the Tumbler.
Yeah, I agree. So why don't we pull the name out for our fifth winner in this contest? And the prize package this time, Dan, what are we looking at?
This is the Dynamic Duo package. This is a set of Batman and Robin plush figures from Bleacher Creatures. And it's exactly that. It's basically a squeezably soft Batman and Robin. And the winner of this is Rachel Gold Knaus. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. In case I'm not, I will say Rachel Gold Knaus from Merchantville, New Jersey. So you get the Dynamic Duo pack as well as the rest of the prize package. Celebrate the Batmobile at the show.
I think everybody wants to have their own squeezable Batman and Robin.
I do. I was hoping they were going to send extras. I was like, I want these. These are awesome. No, they're really, really cool. They have a whole bunch of them. They've got, I think they've got Batgirl out now. They've got Catwoman. And well, I'm not sure. They might have the Joker out also. But yeah, they are really cool. And of course, they look like, like kind of like distorted Batman and, Burt Ward and Adam West. They're pretty awesome, though. I may actually go buy my own.
All right. So we're coming towards the end. We've still got one more name to call out. But before we do that, you and I have both had experiences with the Batmobile. You more so than me, because my experience with the Batmobile was one time at New York Comic Con 2010, I want to say. I think it was 2010, or it might have been 2012. The Batmobile was there, Adam West was there, Burt Ward was there, and all they were doing was giving you a chance to stand with a foot in the door of the Bat. That was it. That was as far. You could not sit in it. And I don't know which I don't know which Batmobile it was. It was there with a whole group of other cars from various TV shows. The Batcycle was there. Scooby-Doo's Mystery Machine was there. I think it was pretty cool, but that's as far as I got. I got to stand next to it. There are pictures of me with the Batmobile on the Facebook page for the Batcave podcast. If you want to take a look at it, I'll probably put them in the show notes as well. But I mean, even just that much to stand there next to the Batmobile, because I remember it was only $10 for the picture. And, my friends were all like, don't do it because you're only standing next to it. I'm like, for $10, I'll stand next to it. Come on, you get to touch it at least. I mean, that's pretty cool. But you've had more of an experience, though.
Yeah, well, I've been pretty lucky. Jeff Breeden actually does some of his outdoor shows. You can actually take a ride in that Batmobile. You won't be able to do it at the show at the East Coast Comic Con because it's indoors, so we won't be able to take a ride. But yeah, he usually charges people, like $5 or whatever, and I know he does stuff for charity, and he does a lot of different shows all throughout New Jersey. And you can, frequently you can sit in the Batmobile and have your picture taken in the Batmobile. Of course, everybody who wins the contest gets their picture taken in the Batmobile for free, and you get your caricature. But my own experience was at the Asbury Park Comic Con, which is the East Coast Comic Con grew from the Asbury Park Comic Con. I was able to ride it around Asbury Park. And it was, I tell you, when you're riding in the Batmobile, the reaction that people have on the street when they see it go by, it's amazing. And like I said, in a different case, I got to sit in a different Batmobile. And to me, I can't tell the difference. I mean, I'm sure that someone who's a real Batmobile fanatic is going to say, oh, well, this is a custom make, and I can tell which vehicle was the basis of this. Because the Ford Futura, was the only one of its kind. Everything else has been built on different kind of chassis. People have kits and what have you, and they're also like customizing companies, and some are considered official and some are considered unofficial. To me, as a fan, it doesn't matter. If it looks like the Batmobile, it's the Batmobile to me. And I'm going to write about this at the site, but the greatest thing was when the Batmobile came to my house. When I actually, last year at the New York Comic Fest, again, this is also a show that the East Coast Comic Con grew out of. Last year we had the two shows. This year it's just one bigger show at the Meadowlands, kind of meeting in the middle. It made more sense to do it that way. Jeff actually brought the Batmobile and picked me up to take me to the show. And all of the neighbors came running out and taking pictures. And to have a picture myself of the Batmobile in front of my house, it's like the greatest thing. And I'll be posting some of that stuff on 13th Dimension as well. It's just like a dream come true.
That is so cool to get picked up and then driven.
It was crazy. It was going up the Bronx River Parkway in the Batmobile and then driven into the Westchester County Center because it was, we had to bring it into the exhibition hall.
Right.
So there was like a garage door in the back. So we actually drove from the front of my house up the Bronx River Parkway. Of course, if you're not from this area, you don't know what I'm talking about, but you can imagine basically house to highway up to an exhibition center, and then you drive in through the back into the hall. It was like driving into the Batcave. It was 10 of the greatest minutes of my life.
Oh, man. It's funny because, I'm thinking like if that were me, I'd be wanting to pull up alongside people and just slowly drive by and nod at them and go, citizens.
Well, when we did it in Asbury Park, I kind of did that. We weren't close enough to anybody because it was pretty early in the morning. But there were people on the street, and I found myself saluting them. I'm like, "There you go, citizen." I mean, it was funny. And I'm sitting there thinking, this is the most absurd, And Jeff, who's a great guy, I mean, he's used to all this. He's
Right.
taken a lot of people for rides, and you're sitting there, and it is an amazing thing. And you're right. You do want to just stop at it. When we were sitting at a traffic light, and I'm just sitting there waiting for the light to change, and everybody's just like gawking at us. It was really a kick, and people get really excited. I mean, I was actually worried when people came driving by when it was parked out in front of the house. I was actually worried that people were going to crash because people were the rubbernecking that was going on. People were driving by or they were on their bikes, and people just stopped. They were taking pictures from their cars. Again, it was just a testament to just how much fun and how much people love the Batmobile. That people were coming out of the house to check it out and look at it. And it was stopping traffic. It was great.
That is fantastic. I've got to ask one question before we pull out our last winner here, because one of our listeners actually just on Facebook asked this question. You had made the announcement that we were going to do this particular episode, and he asked the question, and I don't know how we can answer it if it at all possible, but when it rains, what do they do? Because we don't have like a top and we don't have any apparent windshield wipers.
That never occurred to me. Of course, it's always perfect weather in Gotham City. They even tell us that in one of the episodes. If they ever had to deal with that, and of course the irony being is that the stock footage that they always show of them coming up against police headquarters, it's got wet streets. So clearly it had been raining, rare as it was in Southern California, at any time. I would imagine that if they'd ever decided to write it in, they would have come up with some kind of special bat canopy that would have probably looked really cool, like a big bat that would cover the top of the vehicle so that they could continue to drive. I'm sure in the comic books it's got windshield wipers, though.
Oh, I'm sure, yeah. I mean, because it's, again, I keep referring back to this because we just did it. It was the Marcia Penguin episode. And when the Batmobile is racing through the streets to save Batman and Robin, it has just rained. In fact, Robin comments on, wow, it just rained, which we were laughing about, wondering which came first, the stock footage, the footage they shot of the Batmobile and then the scenes of them in studio, or vice versa. Had they, how was this all planned? But, the Batmobile itself is looking pretty dry if it just rained.
Right. I think also in the episode with the Riddler, when he's doing the silent movies, there's a scene where Batman and Commissioner Gordon are outside and Batman's in the Batmobile, I think. And it looks like it had just rained also. But who knows? It is funny to think about. Let me ask you this question, though. Besides the Batmobile, what's your favorite Bat vehicle?
I would honestly have to say the Batboat. I used to fantasize about taking the Batboat out and riding that along because my father was a fisherman. He always owned a boat of some kind that we would go out on and go fishing and such. So when I saw the Batboat, I was like, that would be so cool.
Yeah. I always had a soft spot for the Batboat because of the old Corgi toys that I had. But I'm pretty partial to the Batcopter. There's a guy named Eugene Knock who owns the Batcopter, and it travels. It's the original Batcopter. It's not a replica. It's not a custom job. It's the actual Batcopter. And it's still flight worthy. And he takes that around, and I've had a chance to actually sit in that Batcopter also. And he's like flown Adam West and Julie Newmar and all of, and he's a terrific guy. That actually usually comes to New Jersey as well. For those of you who are at the East Coast Comic Con, it usually comes to the Meadowlands at the New Jersey State Fair in the summertime. So hopefully they'll be back again this year.
Yeah, no, I definitely want to do that this year. I seem to recall last year at the last moment they had to cancel or something that he couldn't get it up in the air. You could see it.
There was a part issue that he had, and of course, when you're talking about a vehicle that's that vintage, mid '60s,
sure,
everything's got to be just so. But he had a twin model, one that was the same model. We actually went, and we were able to sit in the Batcopter. But then when we went in the air, we went into the sister model, which was really weird because you're sitting there with the bubble and the open door, and you're flying around in the air. And it was equally terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. But hopefully he'll come back this year and we'll get to go up in the actual Batcopter itself.
Oh, yeah. No, I definitely want to try that this year if he's at the State Fair. I would love that. All right. So why don't we announce our sixth and final winner for this contest?
Okay. Well, this is the Dominoed Dare Doll package. What's particularly cool about this package, if you'll indulge me, is that two of the elements, everything else that we've mentioned so far, they're all great stuff. And I don't say that just because we're doing the contest. I handpicked these items for a reason, and because they're all things that I think are really, really cool things to have. This is interesting because there have not been many Batgirl items released yet. And NJ Croce, that I mentioned earlier, the company that makes Bendables, is putting out Batgirl and is putting out a Frank Gorshin Riddler, as well as the Batmobile that's going to be coming out soon. But these things aren't even in stores. And I'm not sure that they're even going to be in stores by the time the show is on April 11th and 12th. So the package includes a Batgirl bendable figure. It's Yvonne Craig in her purple spangly outfit. The Riddler bendable figure. They're about 5.5 inches each. But because this is also a Batmobile contest, you get 4 keychains with bendables. One with Adam West Batman, Burt Ward Robin, a Batman logo that's more the generic classic yellow logo, but also a Batmobile bendable keychain. So you actually get to have if you want to drive your own personal Batmobile, now you have a Batmobile keychain. And I specifically picked 4 of these keychains so that if you have a Batmobile, Batcopter, Batboat, and Batcycle, you now have a keychain for each of those. So it's 6 items all in one package. This is actually one of my favorite packages of all of these that we're doing. And the winner of that is William Bracero of Astoria, Queens. So congratulations, William. You are our 6th winner. And again, I want to point out that if you were not one of the winners, one of the 6 winners, tickets are still available. And you can get them through eastcoastcomiccon.com. It's at the Meadowlands Exposition Center, April 11th and 12th. And even if you didn't win any of these prizes, you could still go and check out the Batmobile. They do have T-shirts on sale. They've got caricatures on sale, and not for a lot of money. We're not talking like huge amounts of dollars. But if you've been interested in the Batmobile and you're really into it, believe me, this is well worth doing because it's a great part and one of the proudest parts of the show that we're doing is having the Batmobile there.
Well, there you have it. 6 winners, 6 great packages, 6 opportunities to sit in the Batmobile, 12 tickets altogether given out here on the Batcave podcast along with 13thdimension.com. Folks, those of you that have won, make sure you come see me and Dan. And those of you that are planning to attend, even if you didn't win, like Dan says, make sure you come to the show because it is going to be a great show. And I'm looking forward to meeting as many Batman, Batcave podcast listeners as possible.
Yeah, we'll be in touch with all of the winners. And also some people who, we also had the Planet of the Apes contest as well. So there are 3 more winners of that contest. But we're also going to be having contests at the show. We're going to have a cosplay contest. We're going to have a trivia contest. So there will be a lot more giveaways actually at the show of some pretty good stuff that was provided by DC Comics, DC Collectibles, Diamond Select, other companies as well that have been very, very extremely generous in sending stuff along, really top-rate stuff. I'm really kind of pleased with what all of these companies have sent to us and will be available for the fans at the show. You want to know more about that, check us out at 13thdimension.com. Check us out at eastcoastcomiccon.com.
And, of course, as always, I will say thebatcavepodcast.com, where you can find show notes on all these episodes that we're doing. You can find all the past episodes that we have done here, whether they are the review episodes or our special from the Batcomputer episodes that we did, including the Batman 66 week I did with Dan last November. So, folks, thanks so much for listening, tuning into this very special episode on the Batmobile. Until next time, Dan, thanks so much. Take care, citizens.
Thanks, John. And again, congratulations to all the winners, and we hope to see you at the East Coast Comic Con April 11th and 12th at the Meadowlands.
Thanks for listening, chums. I don't have a bat phone, but you can contact the Batcave podcast through its Facebook page, Twitter, email at thebatcavepodcast@gmail.com, or by phone at 888-866-9010. Subscribe to the podcast via Libsyn.com, that's LIBSYN.com, or through iTunes. The Batcave podcast is part of a series of pop culture podcasts from the Chronic Rift Network. find them at chronicrift.com. So until next time, citizens, sane Bat Time, sane Batcave podcast.